All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, our free webinar on how to find your market rate. It is 12 o'clock. I'm going to wait until about 12:01 to get started and let some people join us. I know a lot of people are joining us from around the world and around the country, and everyone's got their lunch times at different times, whether you're on the West Coast or the East Coast. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds here to join. We are also streaming live, not just on Vimeo, but on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So if you're joining us on those platforms, hi. I would love to hear where all of you are from. So wherever you're joining us from, put in the chat your name, your job title, and your location. It would be so great to hear, not only what all of you do, but where you're located. For me, I am located right outside Washington, D.C. in the Northern Virginia metro area. As you all know, I am a content creator. I used to be a senior data analyst, and I'll get into my background a little bit here shortly. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and get started so that we don't miss out on any key information here in the 30 minutes that we've got together. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the first slide, which is our title slide, of course. This webinar is how to find your market rate. In this 30 minutes, we're going to go over all the resources and different ways that you can go about finding your market rate and whether or not you are being fairly compensated. We'll also touch on, the importance of it, tips and tricks that I have come across to better evaluate your own worth, since there are so many resources out there, and sometimes it can get a little confusing. And then at the end, we'll touch on, steps that you can take next if you find out that you are underpaid, and the importance of pay transparency. So let's get into it. Let's see the agenda. So we're going to start with a quick introduction. I'll tell you all a little bit about my background, how I started Salary Transparency, how we got to where we are today. And then we'll get right into it. What is a market rate? What is the actual definition? What is the important factors that you need to be aware of that will really impact your market rate and how much you are worth? Then we'll go into, how do you find your market rate? What are the different resources that you can go about utilizing to find how much you're worth, which are, the most important? How many do you need to get? All of that. And then we'll go into those next steps I mentioned. What do you do once you find out you're underpaid? How can you help one another? How do you talk to your colleagues about pay in the office? All of that. So starting with the introduction, if you don't know me, hi, I'm Hannah Williams. I am the founder and CEO of Salary Transparency. It's a page that I started in April of 2021, which we are actually a couple days away from Salary Transparency's 2-year anniversary. Absolutely crazy to even say those words out loud, and that we've been doing it for 2 years now. So thank you, to everyone watching and tuning in, because, our community is the reason that we keep going, and also the reason that the platform that we have. So truly grateful to all of you. But I started this platform because I found out that I was undercompensated about $25,000. And I utilized the resources and tips and tricks that I'm going to go through in this webinar to get a raise of $25,000 and move on up to another company. And, that series of events was what inspired me to start Salary Transparency and share what I've learned with all of you, because I think this is a system that really needs to change. And really needs improvement. So in this webinar, we've got 30 minutes together. What you're going to need is pen and paper if you want to take notes. If you are joining us on any social channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, I've put a link in the comment section that you can go to join, so that after the workshop's done, you can get a copy of these slides and also all the resources that we're going to go through. So if you don't want to take notes, you're not really a pen and paper person, that is totally fine. Just make sure that you sign up at that link so that you get these resources after, in case you miss anything. But let's go ahead and start with, what is a market rate, and getting a solid understanding of what that means and how it applies to us. So the boring definition of a market rate is the going rate the employment market is willing to offer for your role. This is not a number that is going to stay in one place at one figure for the rest of your life. It is a number that is completely flexible with the economy and the worker economy as a whole. For example, if you work in the tech industry, I'm sure you know that there have been lots of layoffs recently and ups and downs in that industry as a whole. So if you work there, sometimes the layoffs and the impacts on the industry are going to affect whether or not you can ask for more or less money in your role. So it's very important to be aware of the employment market, especially in your industry, because that is going to determine, what the flexibility of your rate is. The next part to be aware of is factors that affect your market rate. I'm sure there are plenty that you all are aware of. So I'm going to touch on the top 5 most popular and important to be aware of. If you know of any while we're going through here that I don't mention, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on what the factors that impact your market rate. So the number one is location, and this can get sometimes tricky depending on if you work remotely or in person. But oftentimes, if you work in person, the location that you are at and that your company is at is going to affect your market rate and whether or not you can ask for more or less money. If you live in a lower cost of living area, your role in that area will probably pay less than the same role in a higher cost of living area like Idaho versus New York City. A social media manager in both of those roles is going to have a drastically different rate, and it's important to be aware of your location and how that's impacted. The next is education. Oftentimes, this can be seen as a college degree, a high school education, a GED, also workshops, certifications, the actual, steps that you have gone to learn different skills. The type of education you have, whether it is directly related or indirectly related to your role, will determine whether or not you can ask for a higher rate. For example, if you are a software engineer with a software engineering degree or a very relevant degree, you can probably ask for a higher salary at a company than someone who does not have that degree. But if you don't have the degree but have gone through a workshop or certifications to gain those similar skills, you can try to ask for more that's as competitive as a 4-year degree. Also, this is dependent on the company, and how they view different tiers of education. So that's important to be aware of as well. The other thing is years of experience. Once again, direct and indirect years of experience. Total years of experience are, how long have you been in the workforce? I have been working since I was 16, which is almost 10 years of experience. But if I had to look at how long I've been working in social media, I would say I've only got about 2 direct years of experience in this field. Your direct years of experience, the higher they are, determine how much more money you can ask for. Versus if you have less direct years of experience, you probably will be starting at a more entry level role within the company. But that's also, has to be balanced with your skills and your experience, not just the years. If you are a fast learner and you've achieved more in your short years of experience than someone more senior, that's important to point out and understand how you compare to them. So have conversations with other people in your industry to learn how you compare, not just on a financial basis, but also skills, education, and experience. The next one is company size. Larger companies often have, obviously, more budget for different roles. Smaller companies will have less budget, but this doesn't mean that you ultimately are going to make less, because what's important to be aware of is total compensation versus base salary, and the number that you are paid on an annual basis, not including your benefits. If you work at a smaller company and they cannot offer you the same competitive salary as a larger company might, this is a great opportunity to negotiate other benefits like pet insurance, health insurance, PTO, 401k match. All of those things are negotiable factors that you can bring to the table to improve your total compensation and give yourself a more competitive salary. The next one is industry. Obviously, direct and indirect again. If you work, for example, in the tech industry, if you're a software engineer working in tech, you will probably be able to command a higher salary than if you work as a software engineer in a non-relevant industry. That is not always the case, though. Some sometimes companies, even if they are in an indirect industry, they will place a lot of focus on developing a certain tier of their business, and they might put a lot of budget behind that. So you might be able to command more if you have those skills and experience to make you a real expert in your role. Just be aware of, what the company is going for or going through, what their goals are, what you're bringing to the table, and then overall how the industry relates to that. All right, so those are some of the major factors to be aware of. The next thing I want to touch on is range size. Oftentimes people will say, okay, well, what is my market rate? Like, is it one number? Is it two numbers? How large should that range be? And the answer to that is no, it is not one number. It is a fair range of a minimum to max difference of no more than $20,000. You want to give yourself about $20,000 of wiggle room between that minimum and max range, because that is what you're going to be negotiating within. If you start at the top of your range that you are, within the expectations of compensation, and you are negotiated down, you'll still end up within the range that you set for yourself. And so you'll walk away happy and satisfied knowing that you negotiated within your range. However, if you start at one number or lower in your range, you might be priced out of that range and end up with less than what you expected. So when you are finding your market rate, and we're going to go through these next few slides, is how you go about finding that with the knowledge of these factors and range and definition. When you go about finding that number, keep in mind that you want to be keeping track of the ranges that people are being compensated and the ranges that you're seeing and how you fall within it. All right, next slide we'll go into is how to find your market rate. These are a couple different resources. We've got three major ways that we're going to go about finding our market rate. And I'm going to start with salary databases. And before we kick into that, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has stuck around and been with us for the webinar so far. We're 10 minutes in. We've got a couple more slides to go through. Really quick shout out to our sponsor of these webinars and the opportunity that we have to, share this information for free with all of you. Capital One Cafe is a phenomenal sponsor of ours that, keeps us caffeinated and also welcomes transparent conversations about money. If you stick around to the end, sign up at the link in all the comment sections that I've dropped on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, you can get a free coffee at your nearest or local Capital One Cafe on us. And thanks to Capital One Cafe. So check it out, and thanks again. All right, let's go into the salary databases. So there are two different types of salary databases that I want you all to be aware of. And when we are looking at them, we're going to try to collect about 2 to 3 reliable sources of data from each of these types. So 2 to 3 general salary database sources and 2 to 3 specific salary database sources. What are those and what do they mean? What is the difference between the two? Number one, general salary databases are just that. They are very general, meaning that they are sometimes the largest size databases out there, and they encompass all industries and all job fields. So when you look at an Indeed, Glassdoor, Salary.com, PayScale source, and you ask for your compensation in comparison to their sources, they're often going to spit back an aggregated average data. They will not show you every single row of data that they have for that specific job field. They're going to give you the average. This is helpful because it tells you, that average market range that we want to be aware of, but you need more information to further pinpoint how you fall within that range. So you're going to start with these general databases, try to find 2 to 3 good sources of data. And by good, I mean lots of data. If they have about 10,000, salaries to pull from, that's a good source of data to compare yourself to. Find 2 to 3 good sources that you feel are, realistic, solid, look good to you, and then move on to the specific salary databases to further pinpoint. Specific salary databases are exactly that. They are very much more narrowed and niche. You can go to specific databases for tech, public jobs, creative jobs. There are tons of different sources for those specific industries and job fields. Also, I want to shout out our own database, salarytransparency.com. If you want to check it out and didn't know that we have a database, it is completely anonymous. And the value that we created with our database is it fills in those gaps of the average aggregated data. If you search a data analyst role on our website, it'll spit back every single submission of data analysts that we have in our database. And you can niche and narrow those down based on your location, your years of experience, your education, and even the company, and see how you compare to every single individual submission. So be sure to check it out. And, like we did with the general 2 to 3 sources, go to 2 to 3 specific sources like a tech database, a public jobs database, a creatives database, and find how you compare on a more niche scale. The next way that you are going to find your market rate is by networking. And don't worry, I have a couple options here for both introverts and extroverts if you are very shy and don't want to have these conversations in person. The caveat here that I want to start with is just like how I said that you want to get 2 to 3 good sources of data for the databases, you also want to ask more than one person when you are networking and asking about compensation. Because if you ask one person how much they make, and you do not know, and they do not know that they are on the lower end of the scale of compensation or possibly outside of it, you might now be basing your research on a number that is less than you should be making. So you want to be gathering multiple sources so you can, see those outliers and hopefully help them correct it as well, but also put yourself on a higher pedestal. So, the first way that you are going to network, and this is for the extroverts, this is for the people that are okay having these conversations in person, is you're going to be asking your coworkers. By asking your coworkers, you're going to be doing this off company time and off company property. And when you do this, you want to be the first to present your own salary. You don't want to be asking others how much they make without being willing to share how much you make yourself. So, go to your coworkers off company time and property so that you avoid any issues with your company in retaliation. And, just a caveat here as well that unless you are a public worker, a railroad worker, or a farmer, basically, unless you are a public employee, if you are a private company employee, it is your nationally protected right, your federally protected right to discuss your pay. I just say that you should do it off company time and property because some companies will find any reason to be upset with you. And while they know it's your right, they might say, well, you can talk about it, but not on our time. And so just protect yourself in that way and have this conversation with your coworker, present your situation, present the issue as well. If you do not feel like you are fairly compensated, tell them why and have that conversation with them to see what they say, because they are probably going to offer up information. If they don't present how much they make themselves, they might give you some insider information about, well, I make more because I have this degree or I have these skills and this experience. And that'll tell you what you can bring to your manager to ask for what you need to do to be fair, to be more fairly compensated. The next way that you can go about networking to find market rate and talking with people directly without doing it in person, without doing it face to face or with your colleagues, is through LinkedIn and also other social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok. LinkedIn is obviously the most easy to use and direct. You can literally look up your job title, niche it, narrow it down to your location, and even more factors than that, and find people in a similar role, in a similar company, in a similar industry that you can reach out to directly and ask, hey, I make X at my company and we just had, a pay increase recently. It wasn't what is up to market rate, which made me concerned about what my market rate is. Can I have a conversation with you about your compensation to see how I compare to your market rate in this industry? It's that simple. And you'd be surprised at how many people also have been through similar situations and believe in the movement of pay transparency and its impact because they've been through it themselves. So Open that door. You'll never know if you don't ask. And the worst they can do is not respond or just say no, but you lose nothing by trying to ask. You can also go on TikTok and Instagram. Those are places where you can find people who are creating content already in roles that you are in or interested in. And the beauty there is that they're already being transparent. They're creating content sometimes about their pay and breaking down, their compensation. So you don't even have to ask them. But those are great resources to reach out to as well. All right. Enough about networking. The last thing that I want to touch on, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'll try to cover this pretty quickly, but is checking salary transparency laws as a way to find your market rate. There are about 15 states right now that have pay transparency laws and several more that have them on the books, meaning that, they are going to go into effect soon. Like DC's pay transparency law is going into effect in June. Maryland's pay transparency law is on the governor's desk and awaiting signature, and soon will be put into place after that. There's other states that have presented legislation, and it is moving through the woodworks. So the important thing here is to, one, find out what your state's pay transparency laws are. I mentioned this earlier, but if you're joining us a little bit later, there are links throughout our LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube where we are streaming live. I put them in the comments that you can sign up at that form so that after this webinar is over, we will send you these slides and all the links and resources we mentioned, because I want everyone to go to this link on this slide. It is our pay transparency laws guide on our website. It's completely free. It's in our resource hub, and we have an interactive map that will tell you what your state's pay transparency laws are, and not just pay transparency, but also salary history and different clauses related to transparency. You want to know where your state is at with this and what your protections are. It's important here because if you do not have a pay transparency law and you do not already have transparency at your access, there are ways that you can use existing laws in your favor. So my little trick here is that if you find out you do not have a pay transparency law, find a state as close to you as possible with a comparable cost of living, as close as possible, that has a pay transparency law. What you're going to do is you're going to go to that state and look up jobs, companies that are hiring for your job or the job you're interested in that state, and take note of how much they are paying their people. Once you know how much they're paying, you can put that number into a cost of living calculator. I like the one from PayScale, which is linked in this slide, but there are tons of cost of living calculators. You can just use whichever one you prefer, and that'll tell you what the pay in that area would be comparable to your location. It is just one of the resources that you can use as a point of your research to find your market rate. And all in all, what you're going to do is use the information from pay transparency laws in your state, networking, and general and specific salary databases to come up with that range and how much you believe that you should be fairly compensated based on all your research. You should, at this point, have tons of great resources and lots of great data points to help you narrow that down and figure out within that range what your optimal, like what you would really like to make within that range. But I advise you to, within your range, always ask for the top of your range, because like I said, if you negotiate and they can't meet you there, you can negotiate down and you'll still fall within the range that you know is fair compensation for your role. It's not one number, it's within that range. So give yourself about $20,000 of wiggle room. But all right, that is all I've got for you all today. These are all the slides. Next steps. What do you do if you find out that you are underpaid? Obviously, you should take the next steps to be fairly compensated, because you deserve it. We don't work for free, especially not in this economy, and our work is valuable. So we deserve to be compensated fairly and respected for the work that we do. What you're going to want to do is use our salary negotiation guide to negotiate fair compensation either at your company, or you're going to start looking for another job. And you can also use the salary negotiation guide to negotiate a fair compensation increase at the next company. My advice is, if you ask your company for a raise and they're not able to provide you, the fair range the raise that you're asking for in that moment, most of the time the company is not going to change, their stance on that. In my experience, when I found out I was undercompensated and I asked for a raise at my employer, they told me that they didn't offer more than 3 to 5% at any one time. And because I had just started, I had to be working at the company at least a year before I asked for a raise, which, a lot of companies have similar policies. So just be aware that your company might not have any flex there, but that doesn't mean that you can't find what you are worth at another company. And you can also use another offer to leverage a raise at your current company if you really do want to stay. But my advice is that a company that is not willing to compensate you what you know you are worth and what your research and sources back up as your worth, you are probably going to be better respected and valued elsewhere. Just my 2 cents. The next thing is to practice pay transparency. Just my last little tidbit is that, if you are here and listening to this and watching this webinar, then that means that you also value pay transparency because there's something to be gained from it, which is fair compensation and equal wages for all. We can carry this on by continuing to practice pay transparency and, punny or not, paying it forward with one another. So if you found this webinar valuable, please take this as a sign that talking about your compensation with your colleagues, your friends, and your family is so powerful and really is going to help change the world and help us all earn higher compensation than what we're currently making. The last thing is ask for what you deserve. It goes without saying, but you're worth it. We all deserve to be fairly compensated. And if you do all this research and go through all these sources, please know that market research is the best way to feel confident walking into a negotiation because it'll help you understand what you're worth. And really, you're going to be able to spot a lowball offer and a good offer. And we shouldn't sway from our research because it's not just, what we think we're worth. The research will back that up. So ask for what you deserve because you're worth it. And if your current company will not compensate you what you're worth, or a new company won't compensate you what you're worth, it's not the end of the world. Keep looking, keep searching because someone will. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to this webinar. I hope you found it valuable. As I mentioned before, if you are joining us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, and you have not joined, signed up for this webinar by providing your email, and you would like a copy of these slides, links to all the resources I mentioned, and of course, free coffee at your closest Capital One cafe or any Capital One cafe you go to, please join and sign up at the link that I've dropped in the comment section on all those platforms. And that way I can ensure that you all get the email after this is over, which will include all these things I mentioned. And of course, the most important thing, which is free coffee. So I'm going to stick around here for about 3 minutes and see if there's any questions in the comments below that I can answer before we hop off. So let's see what we've got going on. We're on LinkedIn, we are on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. Okay, we've got some comments here. Taste of Magnolia. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Taste of Magnolia. I'm sure that's not your name, but I like your username, though. Thank you, Muffin Daredevil. I also love your username. Thank you for the good content. I appreciate it. Excellent point about speaking to coworkers about compensation. Yes, we need to carry the torch and continue to have these conversations with one another because it's important and it's the only way that we can give this movement wings and really have impact as workers in, this real struggle for balance of power between workers and employers. If we talk about our pay, we even those odds. So it is very important. I'm so glad you agree. Did you ask for a raise prior to leaving the company? I absolutely did. When I found out that I was undercompensated, I did all of this. I did all my market research, and this is not, something that I just tried. All these tips and tricks and all the resources I mentioned in this webinar is direct from Harvard Business Review, Business Insider experts, you name it. This is advice that they all recommended that I do. And when I asked my employer for a raise, they told me, I had just started about 6 months before. I had to wait until I'd been with the company at least a year to get that raise. That was their policy. They didn't give out raises to anyone that hadn't been there a year. And then the second part of that was I was asking for a $25,000 fair market increase or fair compensation increase. And they told me they didn't give out raises of more than 3 to 5% at any one time. I was making $25,000 less. I just knew that I was going to be constantly chasing yearly annual increases to make what I was worth. And that time that I'd be missing out on making my worth was not going to cut it for me. So I started interviewing for other jobs, and soon enough, I had my first interview. And in that interview, the recruiter asked me about my salary requirements, and I asked her for the budget because I didn't want to tell her what my fair, range was. And I'm so glad I did ask for the budget because she told me that it was about $115,000, which was $10,000 more than I was prepared to ask for, but still fell within my range. So I learned my own lesson there, which is why I tell everyone to negotiate at the higher end of their range, because all you can do is get pushed down, but there's no harm in asking for more. I was prepared to ask for less, and they were not going to offer me more or reward me for asking for less. No one is going to reward you for asking for less, so always ask for more. I hope that that's a really good way to end this webinar. We just hit 12:30, so I'm really hoping that you all found this really valuable. And please don't forget to sign up so that I can send you the slides, the links, and the coffee card so you can get some free caffeine this weekend. Also, just a quick shout out, if you are in the Washington, D.C. metro area, the DMV, we are turning 2 years old next week. So this Sunday at the Capital One Cafe in Georgetown, we are hosting our birthday party. If you came last year, you'll know what we're talking about, but we are hosting the same birthday party at the Capital One Cafe in Georgetown this Sunday. We're going to, gather and celebrate our page and our community. We're going to have stickers, free coffee, temporary tattoos, it's going to be a really great time. And if you want to do an interview, please feel free to come. If you don't want to do an interview, it is not required. You can come, say hi, meet some people in our community, and, hopefully just have a good time. So hopefully we'll see you on Sunday if you are local to the DMV area. And if not, make sure that you are joining our broadcast channel on Instagram so you can keep track of where we'll be traveling next, and hopefully we'll be in your state or city soon. All right, I think that's all from me. I'll catch you guys all later on social media. You'll see me soon. And if you signed up, you'll be getting an email from me shortly. If you don't get it within the next few hours, just make sure to check your spam. But hopefully it doesn't end up there. But all right, thanks everyone. Bye, and hope you have a great weekend.